What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Collider interview studio at TIFF 2024 at the Cinema Center, brought to you by Range Rover Sport. Max, I am so excited to talk Shell with you. I'm a big fan of your work in general, but I get especially excited when I hear that you're working on another feature effort as a director. So congratulations on yet another accomplishment.
Thank you so much, Barry.
Clearly, I know what Shell is. It's getting a film festival debut, so our audience will not know about your movie just yet. So would you mind giving a brief synopsis?
Absolutely. This is good practice for me. Shell is a sort of love letter to the kind of 80s and 90s movies, which were very like movie star driven genre movies. So there's a lot of different stuff in this movie. It's a comedy, it's scary, it has maybe a creature in it. There's a lot of different elements, but it's really ultimately just hopefully a love letter to the kind of movies that like we grew up on.
I'm bursting at the seams to talk about certain things you do that I think heavily lean into that. We will not spoil anything, but I'm just going to say a lot of that was exceptionally well executed.
Thank you.
Before we get into certain specifics on the movie, I wanted to go back to a couple things I was reading in your director's statement that just caught my eye and I found interesting. Your mom worked for the British Board of Film Classification and would recite movie plots to you kind of as bedtime stories. I was just wondering, did you have a particular favorite?
Well, in retrospect, I realized she was probably being rather lazy. She should have written her own bedtime stories.
Lazy or inspired, I don't know.
Well, it cursed me to be a filmmaker, I think, because what happens is you're going to sleep and you're hearing, a description of Terminator 2, and then a month later, Terminator 2 comes out, and you've already sort of played it through in your head, and then you get to see, oh, this is what the T-1000 actually looks like, and I'm obsessed with film, and I'm sure it's because of that. My favorite bedtime stories, I remember Forrest Gump was a pretty good bedtime story. That's fair. That's a good one, right? For a kid to fall asleep to.
Helps you go to bed on a somewhat positive note.
Exactly.
Somewhat positive note.
Somewhat.
I mean, I don't know what details your mom included in that version.
Yeah, she might have left some stuff out.
Actually, there's a follow-up to that. I don't know how specifically you remember this either, but what story changed the most from how your mom told it to you compared to the film when you finally saw it?
Well, my mother's very eccentric, so I'm sure if we were to go back and listen to some of her versions. No, I don't know which one she changed. I don't know which one she changed the most. But like so many of those movies that she would talk to me about are present in Shell in some way.
Now I keep thinking about there's like a meta movie idea in this where like a parent tells their child a story about a movie, but then the movie comes to life before their eyes in the film itself.
That's a very good idea that you shouldn't be sharing publicly.
I'll hand it to you. I'm not going to make it myself. I got to give it to someone who could do it and do it well. So Teen Spirit was your last film as a director, and I wrote 6 years. Wow, 6 years between the two films. What would you say was the most difficult part about getting this the green light during that gap?
Well, getting this movie made, and I'm sure most of the filmmakers at this festival tell similar stories, but getting this film made was comically challenging. It was sort of a Heart of Darkness level process. And a lot of that's just to do with external circumstances. Obviously, there was a pandemic, there were 2 strikes, there was lots of things going on in the world that made it challenging for us. And we have a huge cast of amazing actors, and getting everybody lined up and all of that stuff is difficult. But I am truly grateful that we got to make it. I think whether people like the movie or hate the movie, it's a very original film. It's a very ambitious film. It's an original R-rated movie with really wonderful actors and technicians putting it together. And I think that's a pretty rare thing in the modern landscape. It was rare for all of us as the filmmakers to get to work on a project like this. It was really special. So I'm really grateful that we got to do it.
I have so many more questions about getting the go-ahead, in particular when it comes to directing your second film, because I feel like a lot of people out there can, sit there and think, oh, like if you did one, the second one has to be easier to get the okay on, when that is often not the case. So I guess what surprised you most about saying, look what I directed in the past, let me do another one, but maybe the roadblocks this industry can still present even though you've already proven yourself?
Well, I'm not I'm not very strategic as a person. I'm not very strategic at all. And my first movie and my second movie could not be sort of more antithetical to one another. So I was asking for a lot of trust again. I'd never shot a comedy. I'd never shot action sequences. I'd never shot visual effects sequences. It's a lot to get people to trust you, but I actually weirdly don't know if those were the hurdles of this film. I think that anybody in 2024 who's trying to make a movie that is not designed to either sell awards or sell toys, right? Those are sort of the two boxes. And this movie is not either of those things. It's really just meant to be really well-made entertainment and a really well-made popcorn movie. But that's really, weirdly, a quite rarefied product in this day and age.
I have great respect for those other two kinds of films because I do enjoy them. But yeah. I do feel like that's what draws me to a movie like yours with maybe a little more enthusiasm and urgency.
Well, bless you.
One more thing about the greenlight process, because again, you've already brought up a couple times that the tone and the style of this movie is a little unique. What would you say was the most useful tool you came up with to present your vision to other people who might not be able to easily picture what you wanted the end product to feel like?
I certainly was going into this with such a hyper-specific idea of the approach, the visual approach of the movie. And honestly, I'm not as you can tell from this interview, I'm not a particularly articulate person. And so it wasn't the easiest thing I didn't think to communicate what you're describing. And yet the people that I ended up collaborating with on this movie seemed to have such an innate kind of subconscious understanding of what we were doing. Two or three people I'd love to point out specifically. Susie Mancini, our production designer, who does an extraordinary job with 11 cents on this movie. Mirren Gordon-Crozier, who was also our costume designer on Teen Spirit, who's a genius. Anybody who works with her will tell you she's just an extraordinary person. Her contribution to the movie, the clothes are such an incredible part of, I think, the aesthetic of the movie. But then my sort of chief collaborator on the film is Drew Daniels, who just shot Honora, which is also in the festival. Drew is a masterful artist. I think we were both very, very excited about what we were wanting to do with this film. And we're both quite mischievous people, I would say. That's probably the commonality in our personalities. And so we really tried to approach the film with a sense of mischief and playfulness every day, whether that was how we were approaching the lighting or literally where we were putting the camera. We tried to be very, very unpretentious in how we made this movie.
I love all those answers and the specific people you just name dropped. I have a habit of asking this question a lot because I do think it's important, but I'll also preface it by saying like literally every single person on a film crew is important. Can you name an unsung hero of Shell? Someone who we don't know their name or we don't get to see their face very often, but they were just instrumental to, pulling this off the way that you wanted and supporting you along the way.
I know that people usually turn their nose up at agents and producers and money people. What was quite moving on this film was I saw a side of people who work in those areas, which was really generous and selfless. And I was not expecting it. But people really went out of their way over and over again on this movie to help me when they didn't have to, and make difficult phone calls and leave their kids' birthday parties. I mean, literally doing really kind of just things out of the kindness of their heart to try and help me make this film. And Fred Berker, who's my producer, who's been my producer for 10 years now, he's given everything to these films and really for no kind of personal reward other than to support me. And so I would never have made one film without him, let alone two, and I kind of owe him everything. So I think I have to sort of mention Fred.
It's of the utmost importance in a challenging industry to have someone like that at your back. It's really special. You also have an exceptional ensemble here. I want to ask about every single person. I'll start with a question that could get at two of them. Of all of the key roles in this movie, which would you say was the easiest to cast, where like the right person kind of like magically came to you? But then I also want the opposite. Which role was the most difficult to find the perfect fit for?
I'm incredibly particular about casting, sort of psychotic about it, and I think I drive everybody crazy because I don't love to micromanage actors once they're on set. So I really believe in hiring the right person and sort of letting them feel like they have the space to explore and find it. Kate Hudson and Zoe Shannon, I think you'd probably agree, is a pretty rare marriage between an actor and a role. It's quite iconic, I think, the performance. I think it's an objective thing. She does something really extraordinary in this movie, and seeing how people have responded to the performance has been amazing. It's all credit to her. I think that Kate and Zoe could not be more different in real life, of course. She's not nearly that sort of Machiavellian, but Kate has a self-possession that you cannot teach somebody. She has an ease in her body and in a physical space, an ease with people, a confidence and intelligence that you cannot teach an actor. And there's so few people I've met in my life experience who I think can do that authentically. So I feel so kind of blessed that we were able to have Kate be a part of this project. There's really not a single character or actor in the movie that I could imagine sort of somebody else playing the part, if that makes sense. But, you know, it was interesting that the part that Kaya Gerber plays, Chloe Benson, was a weirdly competitive part. She doesn't have a ton of screen time in the movie. It's a very pivotal part in the movie. It's very important to the story.
That it is.
But her actual sort of real estate is rather slim. And so I was surprised by how many people wanted to play the part. And Kaya really won it sort of fair and square. She was so selfless in how she approached it. She's a real professional. I think you'll find this with any filmmaker who's worked with her and any actor who's worked with her. They will speak with her very highly because she has a brilliant work ethic, and very little ego. Really, really professional person and a delight to work with. So I'm so grateful that she did the movie, and she was such a guardian angel to stay with it for so long.
Perfect casting, really across the board. In particular with Kate, I feel like there's this hard to find the right way to articulate this, but it's so cool when I could see someone like that lose themselves in the role, but also play into the fact that it's the coolest thing ever to see Kate Hudson play that character. It's it sounds like the two things shouldn't be able to exist at the same time, but here they do. And that's a special thing to be able to achieve.
I agree.
You brought up how specific you are about casting, and that's making my mind go down this path, but because of course you're a very experienced actor, and I love digging into the experience of directing when you have history as an actor. So big two-part question about that. Can you tell me something that a director did for you in the past as an actor that you appreciated and now strive to bring to your actors, but also something that you wish more directors gave you that now you like to make sure your cast has?
I can't really answer the second question because I think all filmmakers are completely different.
Absolutely.
And I would never sort of demand any kind of approach. I think that I was lucky enough to work with David Fincher. I think anybody who works with David Fincher, it leaves an impression. It's funny, there's a sort of idea of Fincher that he does, you know, a million takes and is sort of didactic in some way. I think that's sort of the opposite of my experience anyway, which is he doesn't actually cut, he resets. And you end up getting a chance to do it a lot more than you would, but in the same allotment of time. So it's a very efficient way of working. And what I loved about it was I never felt pressure to do it right. I always felt like if this take doesn't work, I know I'll get to do it again. I felt like I was always given the opportunity to explore. I felt very supported in that movie. And so I do try and steal a little bit of that approach when I'm working with actors. I try not to say, you know, do it like this. I try to give them the opportunity to do it as many times as they would like and try things and feel like they can fail. I think it's really important is that actors feel like...
Literally just talking about that in the last interview.
Yeah, that they can fail and there's no punishment for it. And of course, that means they have to trust you. They have to trust that you won't put something into the film that they wouldn't be proud of.
Oh, I have so many follow-up questions. I also have to make sure to ask you about working with Elisabeth Moss here. But first, just to jump on what you just said there, I love hearing about sets where people feel comfortable failing because I do often think that you wind up finding kind of like that extra special magic when you take big swings and maybe fail that you wouldn't have been able to access otherwise. So can you give me an example of a time on set when things didn't go to plan? You had to pivot, but you wound up finding something even better in the process.
Sort of on an hourly basis, I would say that was what happened on our film. When you have such a limited, we only had 25 days to shoot this film. It's not a movie that should be shot in 25 days. So we had to be so incredibly diligent and prepared. And every day there was a requirement to think out of the box. I think what our blessing was the fact that Drew and I come from kind of a similar background and a similar approach to all of this, which is a very informal one. We would even drive around with just a little camera and get stuff together just in like on the weekends. We're not too pretentious about how we have to achieve what we're there to do. It was really always interesting. There's a scene. I can't even give stuff away.
So I'm bursting at the seams to talk about certain things right now.
There's a. How do I do this? There are some set pieces in the film which require a lot of practical effects, I would say. And those were really fun to do and brought about a sort of almost like Roger Corman-esque energy on set as we tried to figure out how much blood and where to spray it.
That stuff is so, like, I don't know what this says about me. It's all so right up my alley, though.
Yeah, me too.
I was eating that up. Back to Elisabeth Moss, your phenomenal lead. Also, obviously, you two have worked together quite a bit. I am curious about how your collaboration changes when you're her director, though. So even after all your experience working together, can you tell me something that she did on the set of Shell that made even you go like, my God, I knew you were talented. Never realized you were capable of that, though.
Yeah, that was my authentic reaction all the time. Her ability, again, we didn't have a lot of time to make the movie, and her ability to deliver instantly a perfectly calibrated performance is not only wonderful for the movie, but was such a helpful thing for the production because we could just move so quickly with her. She will give you 3 completely different versions of something, but they are all so precise. Incredibly precise actor. I just did ADR recently with her for the film. I've never seen anything like it. It's like she can hear something once and it can be incredibly nuanced, what she has to replicate, and she can just do something extraordinary. I'm not the first person to describe the singularity of Elisabeth Moss.
Singularity of Elisabeth Moss is like a very applicable term to use for literally every single thing that she does.
Yeah,
so clearly, Shell has not come out yet, so I'm going to get greedy with these last couple of questions, but I do want more from you behind the lens. So what is a new tool in your directing toolkit, so to speak, that you gained from making Shell that you would be eager to apply to another feature as a director?
Oh, that's a really great question. I learned a huge amount on this movie. I found it actually quite humbling. The thing that was most challenging for me, and I think this might be something a lot of people run into, is when you have, it's not the things you ever think are going to be difficult. We have all these sort of car chases and, horror set pieces and all these things. And those things actually, I found anyway, were not the things that sort of kept me up at night. The things that kept me up at night was when it's a very character-driven movie. And you have a lot of very, very long dialogue scenes, and often people are stationary, or we are locked into a certain kind of geography, and finding ways to keep the movie cinematic and also work within our very confined schedule was a really new skill for me. So I was learning a lot every day, and a lot from the people, my collaborators, because we were just really blessed with just extraordinarily experienced people around me who have done this way more than I have. And so I kind of really relied on them all the time to teach me and help me kind of navigate all of this. It was a lot of firsts.
So now the greedier question about more directing. Do you hope to get something else going soon? Obviously, some of the things that created that 6-year gap were completely out of your control, but can I expect another feature film from you as a director in the near future?
I would certainly hope so. I would love for it not to be 6 years between movies. My father was a filmmaker, and he would equally take 100 years between projects. So I hope that that's not hereditary, and I hope that I can move faster. I'm certainly dying to keep making films. It's my great passion.
Will you keep leaning into genre storytelling?
Well, I've made 2 movies that are so wildly different from one another that even I'm not quite sure what I'll make next. But there were certainly elements, I would say, of Teen Spirit, my first movie, that I miss. Certainly working with music in that way, and so we'll see.
I never like to box someone into one thing, but when I see someone do something I tend to love so well, in particular certain aspects of the show we cannot talk about, I can't help but want more of it. I want to end on this question. I wasn't going to ask it, but I did in my last interview, and I feel like it's an important thing when you accomplish the massive feat of making another feature film. And I also find in this business, no one tells themselves good job nearly enough. We give each other awards. It's super cool. I think we should keep doing that, but nobody gives themselves the credit they deserve.
Lovely thing to say.
What is something you accomplished making Shell that you know you'll be able to look back on and say, I am so proud of what I did there? For
an English person, that's such a challenging question to answer.
I think I heard a very similar response to that question in the last interview too.
I'm not going to make it an I answer. I'm going to say that I think that we are so lucky to have gotten to make this film. I truly believe that it's such a privilege to get to tell stories like this. I'm very lucky. I've now made 2 movies. I don't officially have final cut on either of my movies. It doesn't say that anywhere. And yet I've been protected by my collaborators and trusted by my collaborators to now make 2 movies with absolute autonomy. I am completely to blame for both of my first films, and I love that. And I know how lucky that is. I can't take that for granted. I don't know if that will always be the case. So I feel very privileged to have made 2 movies that are completely my own.
Beautiful answer. I'm rooting for you behind the lens.
Keep
making stimulating stuff that keeps me on my toes and that feels uniquely yours, which Shell very much does. So huge congratulations on the film.
Thank you, Perry. Thank you for the beautiful questions. Thank you.